And now I'd like to open the meeting to the sharing of testimonies of healing through Christian Science.
I am very grateful this week for a valuable lesson. The building that my apartment is in now has a new owner. And in that process, I had a few encounters that made me unsure what my future in that apartment would be. There are a lot of things that I'm comfortable with being uncertain of in my life, things that I find it very easy to trust God with, knowing He will unfold answers to me at the right time. Yet this question of home, however, truly made me uneasy, and it took a lot of prayer and practitioner support to get through. I realized that my whole life, from a very young age until even 2.5 years ago, I kept losing what I considered to be home. This apartment is the 22nd place I have lived in. As soon as I understood that, I had this strong feeling that my home is in God, and nothing can undo that. God will never kick me out, and no one on earth can do anything to change that. All uneasiness and worry simply left me after realizing that. There are some feelings that can't be put into words properly, and the feeling of being home that I have right now is just amazing. I am so grateful to God, to Christian Science, and to my practitioner for this lesson, and every lesson I have learned here in Plainfield. I'm so grateful for every way God is showing me to let go of fear and replace it with joy and understanding. What a wonderful life this is. Thank you.
Thank you.
For quite a while, I had been feeling guilty about the outcome of a couple of situations in my past that I felt the outcome was my fault. I asked a practitioner for help and was told I've been browbeaten by error, and this was disobedience, to stop it. Before long, it came so clear to me that my failure was not a failure. It was all a situation being completely controlled by God. Not me, it was God. He was in control and removed me from the situations that I was in because He loves me and He needs me here to do His work. This guilt has been replaced with gratitude to God for loving and needing me, and my great gratitude to the practitioner for support so I could see this. I'm so grateful to be here and for all that I'm continually learning. And thank you for those readings.
Thank you. And I just remembered I'm supposed to announce each one who testifies. The first was given by Jeremy from New Jersey, and the one you just heard was Lillian from New Jersey. Okay, Linda from Pennsylvania, go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you for the beautiful readings tonight. I am grateful for an important lesson I learned while working with a Plainfield practitioner over several weeks. I had called her for prayerful support regarding a tense interpersonal situation with potential complicated problems. One day I was in a position where I needed to respond to a sticky message. The human answers seemed to require care and skill, especially since previous interactions had been ineffective or ignored. The practitioner's calm, clear thought while she spoke to me stopped the anxious mental flood of trying to solve this problem in my head. Some important things she shared with me were that truth is powerful. Let God give you the words and lead your actions. Stand with principle, and principle stands with you. Finally, one that really stuck with me was I needed to see this individual as God sees them. And I was to speak to her as an idea of God, and I was an idea of God, and this completely replaced the negative thoughts in my mind and any picture I was holding. Once at peace, I wrote my response. The words suddenly came to me unplanned, short, clear, and direct. but they were kind. And nothing I could have personally come up with myself, and I know it wasn't myself because they weren't things that I was originally thinking I should say. The response from the individual was immediate and respectful, and it turned the situation completely around. Only God's hand and the work of the practitioner can explain the amazing, beautiful results. It was a very powerful lesson for me to put my life in the care of God. I'm very grateful for Mrs. Eddy and for the Plainfield Church. Thank you very much. Good evening.
And thank you. Joanne from Florida, go ahead.
Thank you. I want to give thanks for something that at first seemed pretty insignificant to me, but after thinking about it, I realized it was very wonderful and hopeful. For several years, I've had an ugly, swollen black spot on my back in a hard-to-reach place, and it was hidden from general view. And no matter what I did, I couldn't get rid of it. 2 days ago, it broke freely and cleared out completely. I attribute this completely to working with a practitioner here. The practitioner is helping me uncover and face some long hidden errors in my thinking. It hasn't been easy, and it's just a beginning, but I am so grateful for it. I am grateful for God's great love in bringing me back to this church, the help of the practitioner here, for the teaching I've received here in the past, and above all, for Mrs. Eddy and Christian Science. Thank you all for having these services online.
Thank you. Dale W. from Virginia, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for the wonderful readings tonight and the testimonies. I'm so grateful for all this church does. There's an article in the July Liberator about the importance of praising God. It's entitled Songs in the Night. It tells of someone whose healing was delayed, so they decided to sing every hymn in the hymnal. And through their joy and gratitude, by the time they were finished, they were completely healed. That reminded me of an experience I had some years ago when our dear dog had an accident on a holiday weekend. He had to be taken to an emergency veterinary hospital where they didn't hold out much hope for a recovery. Our children were away at college. My husband had to leave on a work trip. So I went home alone and sat down to the piano and went through the whole hymnal singing hymns. There were so many messages of hope and strength in those verses, messages that told me that God was right with me and with his whole creation, and that there was nothing to fear. Our dog spent several days in the hospital, even though they weren't doing anything with him. He was just resting there. There was no change, so I took him home. A week after the accident, the dog was examined again by the emergency vet and my vet, and they talked together. And I was told that they had no hope of recovery. I decided to take him home, even though my vet said, "Don't go on so long that you lose all your happy memories of him." I kept the dog with me wherever I was in the house. It was not a sad time or a burden. We enjoyed our time together. I think the time I spent turning to God as soon as this happened, not accepting any verdicts, but asking God what to do every step of the way, led me to do what I needed to do. One day, a month after the accident, our dog just got up all by himself and walked and didn't stop. And that was the end of the problem. I'm very grateful to have read the article in the July Liberator and to be reminded of God's ever-presence and his all-encompassing care.
Thank you. Tom from Iowa, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm just grateful in general for God's blessings and practitioner help in this church. I love also all that the church offers by way of its website and teleconference feature and magazine, Liberator, and so on. I'm grateful that there's such great good taking place today. We see it. Thank you.
And thank you. Chardell from Pennsylvania, go ahead.
Everything that comes from Plainfield Christian Science Church is a blessing, and tonight I would like to give thanks for all the testimonies that are given on Wednesday nights. There is one I remember that was a prayer for a grandchild, and I use it for my grandchildren, family, myself, and all. Part of it goes like this, quote, "You already know everything you need to know, and you recall it the instant you need it. Your focus is strong and steady on God, and God alone. Nothing to distract or be distracted. God, mind, knows everything, and you can call on that mind and know exactly the right thing to say and do at exactly the right time, and do it," unquote. I believe that many testimonies become healings for someone else who is listening to or reading them, and what a wonderful thing this is. Thank you, and thank you for tonight. Everything is beautiful.
Thank you. Gary from New Jersey, go ahead.
It was many years ago that God brought me to this church, but I'm still very grateful that God brought me here. My wife and I were attracted to the church because there was a practitioner in this church who healed, who had a tremendous love for the science of Christianity, who had a tremendous reverence and respect for Mary Baker Eddy, and who spoke plainly and had no nonsense, and she healed. And I remember after coming here one day, I had trouble walking. I had a pain in my hip, and the more I walked, the more painful the pain became, to where very quickly I could barely walk at all. So when I could, I called the practitioner for help, and I was met with the greatest love and the greatest conviction that God could and would heal this. I was told to read and sing hymn number 139 that starts out, "I walk with love along the way, and oh, it is a holy day." And I was also told that when error pushes at me, to push back. And I'm sure that that was inspired because I had been feeling pushed around a little bit, and I needed to push back. So I stayed home from work that day, and I studied, and I read, and I reacquainted myself with God, and it was remarkable. I could feel God's presence. I could feel the love of the practitioner working. I could feel my peace return. And by the end of the day, I could walk freely without any pain. And that condition never returned again. I'm so grateful for this and many, many healings in Christian Science, for the work of that practitioner, for what I have learned about Christian Science in this church. And so grateful for Mary Baker Eddy for discovering and giving us this tremendous science. So good to be here tonight.
Thank you. Sharon from New Jersey, go ahead.
I'm grateful for a healing that happened a couple years ago. I was invited to go on a trip with some members of this church, and I knew it was the right idea, and I was very happy about it. And I went to my office and asked if I could have the time off. And my manager said, "I'm sorry, but my mother is getting married in Puerto Rico that weekend, and I won't be back until the following week. So you could have the next week off." And I was very disappointed, and I called the practitioner in this church and told the practitioner the situation. She didn't accept it. She said the power of a right idea cannot be stopped. And I thought, wow, that's putting God in action. So she worked, I worked, and about a week before this trip, my manager came to me and said, "You can have that time off. My mother postponed her wedding, so you're free to have that time off." Nothing could have changed that but the power of God. There isn't anything that God can't heal and take care of. I'm just so grateful to have learned this in the church, for all the healings I've had. Thankful to God, Mary Bakeretti, and for the practitioner and all the love that's expressed. And thank you for the readings.
Thank you. Sana from Illinois, go ahead.
I'd like to give thanks for the wonderful readings tonight and the beautiful testimonies. And I'd like to give thanks for God's guidance in our lives, especially during those times when we need spiritual strength to get us through difficult times. Recently, a parent at the school where my husband and I are administrators passed on very suddenly, leaving behind a lovely wife, a little girl, and a baby on the way. We found this out the evening before the service was to be held, and we felt it was right to be at that service to show our love and support for this dear family. But that night I felt so heavy. I was drawn in by the tragic circumstances of this situation, and I could find no peace, and I dreaded going to the service the next day. I was feeling a great sense of sadness for this dear mother and her daughter. And after spending quite a long time rehearsing the human picture in my mind and unable to find any peace, I asked God for help, and the thought came to me very strongly and simply, God is life, there is no death. And within moments, it felt like a weight had lifted off my shoulders, and I was able to get to sleep. The next day, I found myself still feeling uncomfortable about having to sit through that service, and I turned to God once again. And it came to me that if I was going to go, it had to be as an expression of love and not out of duty. And then it came to my husband that we should go a half hour earlier than the service was scheduled. And when we arrived, very few people were there, and the mom was sitting quietly in the foyer with her daughter, and the little girl's face just lit up when she saw us enter. And we had this wonderful quiet time to spend with them, and the most beautiful ideas came to me to share with this young mother. And we also thought of some special ways we could be helpful to her with the care of her daughter when she returned to work. The mother expressed such heartfelt gratitude, and I felt so uplifted by the experience. We shared some lovely emails during the week that followed as well. I am so grateful to God and for all that Christian Science teaches us about divine life and love, and how in giving we are blessed.
Thank you. Suzanne from Vermont, go ahead.
Good evening. I'm very grateful to be here tonight, and grateful for this church and for all of its members and the very uplifting resources we have and services and meetings such as tonight. I wanted to give my thanks to Plainfield Church for giving me a backbone. And I grew up in, the reason I'm saying that, I grew up in Christian Science, and yet for decades, I never shared it with anybody. I never really mentioned it unless I felt like I had to. And I certainly never gave away a copy of science textbook, Science and Health, which today seems odd to me. But about 6 months ago or so, it occurred to me that if I was going to give out a Christian Science textbook, I'd better have some on hand. And I have to say I was inspired. I think it was by Jim, who was giving them out to various people, and I thought, well, that's something that I could do too. So I ordered a stack of them, and lo and behold, in the past year or so, I've given out about 6 or 7 copies, which to me is pretty neat because, and I'm always surprised at how very enthusiastic people are to receive a gift. And I think it's because they see that you are so happy and they want part of that. They want part of what you have. If you're living Christian Science, then you're having fun and you're living Christian Science and you're loving and they want a part of it. So I've been even overjoyed with the reception, and I've given away also some of the Liberator magazine, which has also been enthusiastically received. So I have to thank this church and the practitioners for keeping me on the straight and narrow, and all the other members for inspiring me to have the courage and now the joy of giving out the Christian Science textbook and our wonderful magazine. Church for giving me a backbone and finally sharing our beautiful Christian Science, which is upheld here in this church.
Thank you. Day from Maryland, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm grateful for what I'm learning about the importance of watching my thought about myself and others, and the blessings that come from holding the right thought. This past week, I had 2 separate encounters with strangers who initially seemed very angry and unfriendly when we met. In each case, I was very tempted to react negatively, but the thought instantly came to me to recognize each person as God's idea, and doing so resulted in a positive interaction. I'm so grateful for each of these instant and significant healings. I'm grateful for all that I'm learning and for each opportunity to demonstrate what I'm learning. And thank you so much for tonight's readings and tonight's meeting.
Thank you. Okay, Bruce from New Jersey, go ahead. I'm so grateful because God took care of me today. I was involved in what I thought was a very simple building project, and soon after and I didn't think it required a building permit because it was so simple. Soon after we got involved in it, the building inspector came by and started shouting, "Stop everything you're doing." He looked at this and says, "You need a building permit for this." And I already engaged somebody else to come over and do the work. And next thing you know, I don't have a building permit, and the inspector says, "Stop, thanks." Now what do I do? And I got to admit, my first reaction was I got this big sense of personal responsibility for having to make this work out, till I sat down and asked myself, really? Is there anything you can do to make this work out? And then I was clear that no, there's not one thing that I can do. So I just simply said, God, if you want us to have this building permit, I know you'll do it. But if you don't want us to have it, that's fine. I'm happy with that too. And then I went down to the municipal building, and filled out the application, thinking that, maybe in a week or so I'll finally get it, like has been my experience in the past getting these permits. But I found out when the inspector was going to come back, so I sat down and just waited for him. And while I was waiting, I remembered the daily calendar statement. It's on our website, and it says, every right idea is invested with power and energy because it comes from the divine mind, God. And that was Peter V. Ross that gave us that statement. So I said, okay, God, you know what the right idea is, and whatever it is, I know it has power and energy because it comes from you. So just show me what the right idea is. And shortly after the inspector came in, I stood up and had a chance to chat with him briefly about what we're doing down there. And he said, okay, I'll sign the permit. You got to go in and pay for it, and you'll have it. I have never gotten a building permit that quickly. I think we must have broken a record today. Thank you, God. Only God could have done it. Thank you. We got our building permit, and we went on with the work. And the guys that I ended up hiring to do the labor, it ended up they didn't waste any time at all because there was other things they can do until the permit come, and then they could resume with the other stuff. God took care of me, and I'm so grateful for it. And another thing that I'm so happy about is to drop the sense of personal responsibility and put it on God and keep that listening ear open and let Him speak through me, if I will. Because when I do, it works out pretty good. Thank you. Florence from Georgia, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm grateful tonight for all the truth that I've learned through Christian Science, and especially for the practical ways I learned to put these truths into practice and take them into my heart through the teachings of Christian Science at Plainfield. A little while ago, I was walking, and out of blue, a thought from a past hurt came to thought. And immediately, the thought came, God requireth the past. I was so grateful to remember that. And it really assured me that, yes, indeed, we have a promise of the Comforter right at hand every time to comfort, to give us what we need. And that was one of them. So shortly after this, another thought came, well, but such a person did something yesterday. And immediately again it said, well, yesterday is also in the past. I was so grateful to see what the error was trying to do, to draw me into wrong thinking. And I'm so grateful that through the discipline from this church as how to align our thought always with God has helped me greatly through many challenges over the years. It really shows that, yes, God is here. He is the promised comforter. And if we turn to Him in times of trouble, we must know, as the reading said, always bear in mind that His presence, His power and peace meet all human needs. And these truths have helped me greatly. And I know that they are helping everybody else everywhere who is led to our website and who is led to our meetings. So grateful for all the testimonies tonight. So grateful for all the inspired hymns that people were led to write from their experiences. It really, there is no other comforter but what we have been promised.
Thank you. Mary from New Jersey, go ahead.
Tonight we have a letter, an email from someone new from St. Louis, Missouri. I've spent a good amount of time on the church website, including working with the Bible lesson and listening to several audio selections and one of the more recent roundtables. As an aside, preachers of all kinds are one of my dearest loves, and the roundtable's discussion about Spirit, the leopard, was an especially welcoming and comforting. This site has been a friend, and clearly from listening to some of the comments of others, many share this feeling. Again, I don't know other words to say besides a simple but heartfelt thank you and all the others involved in your mission for not only your willingness to do what is asked, but actually doing what you believe has been asked of you by God and by Mrs. Eddy as well. I do believe her guidance will always remain for those willing to listen and obey in earnest. The daily works performed through the church have also provided an insight that is developing into the radical and continuous requirements upon those who are endeavoring to be true Christian scientists. And while a bit overwhelming in that every moment is devoted to God and the cause, any other pursuit at this point now seems rather ridiculous. With gratitude and appreciation. And then from our bulletin board, Georgia, this is a quote from Bicknell Young, article Individual Consciousness. Today is the day of conscious oneness with God, and our whole life can start anew from this period. Let us take today as our day, end quote. This article is one of many articles provided by Plainfield. I have found so many beautiful articles on this website. They inspire me and help me understand and grow in my relationship with God. Thank you, Plainfield. In Florida, thank you so much for posting the readings by Doris Evans of the Max Dunaway poems. So much love in these readings. They are a comfort every time I listen to them. And then New York, which was first written in Spanish and then translated to English. I'm very grateful to God for making possible today's service and to all at Plainfield Christian Science Church for another wonderful Sunday service. The lesson today in the adult class was of great help. I knew it would be a good class, for it was filled with much needed inspiration about the topic forgiveness in this week's very good Bible lesson. Then the service was fantastic. The Sunday service always leaves me very happy and hopeful. The rest of the day is lighter. Thank you to all that participated in today's discussion and to the readers, Fairley and Florence, and to all. I'm very grateful for tonight's service as well, the beautiful hymns. I love that. I love both hymns tonight, but the one, Come ye disconsolate, where'er ye languish, here health and peace are found, life, truth, and love. Here bring your wounded hearts, here tell your anguish. Earth has no sorrow, but love can remove. That is such a beautiful sentiment, and I know when first coming here that would have been the description of me, disconsolate. Just feeling perhaps hopeless, sick, tired, discouraged, insecure, fearful, you name it. And through learning and understanding about this good God that loves me, my life has totally changed. And I now have a peace that I never knew before existed. I thought the readings tonight, too, were lovely. And the statement, I guess it's in Prose Works, where Mrs. Eddy says, those loyal to God have patience and strength. That word loyalty, I've thought about it a lot lately because I feel it's a word that maybe people don't hold so highly in thought. And it is a quality of God. And loyalty is very precious. And of course, it's always loyalty to God. But perhaps you've had a friend or a relative, a business, a church, a nation. Maybe they've fallen into hard times in some way. Does that mean you desert them? Loyalty would say no. And it's not loyalty to person, place, or thing, but it is to God, to that right concept of what they are in truth, that they are God's expression. And as you hold to that right concept, you can see the material picture change. And so that loyalty does give you patience and strength. It's a wonderful thought. I thank God for loyalty. I thank God for those of you that have been so loyal in your application of science, in your dedication to the work that goes on here. You're not bumped off, but you work, as Mrs. Eddy says, through sunshine and sometimes through storm. I'm so grateful for this. I'm so grateful for those readings tonight, for Mrs. Eddy giving us this science, and I'm grateful again to have our live organist, Jim. Always so wonderful to hear our organs soar with such beautiful tones.
Thank you.